Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the NUA Masters Podcast. Today I'm joined here with Elliot Knott.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you doing?
Not too bad, I'm all right.
Thanks for coming along. I can't wait to kind of get stuck in and learn a little bit about what you do. But before we begin, let me get this right, you're full-time photography student on the Masters course.
That is correct.
Cool. So let's get started. I think the point behind this, as I've said in the other episodes, is to learn a bit about you and about who's kind of, this is going to sound cheesy, but behind the camera, because you do photography. But you know who you are and why your art is important. Sure. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Do you want to tell me a little bit about kind of what you do in your practice?
So at the moment, it's more of a sort of traditional vibe photography. So, you know, your classic approach to photography, 35mm, anything film related is kind of what I'm going for at the moment. I sort of ditched the digital camera at the start of the Masters because I thought, you know, for me, it was just, I sort of got what I wanted out of it and I wasn't getting the satisfaction I was taking pictures anymore. And, you know, everything's really decided for you and everything led to, you know, taking thousands of images and one of them's going to be fine. So
this is the digit taking.
Yeah, so this is the process I'd led up to why I shoot now. So I was shooting loads of digital and, you know, taking 2,000 odd pictures, filling a card up and going, yeah, one of them's going to be fine and, you know, and I'll stick with that. And I thought when I started the Masters, I'm like, you know, I've got to do something. There's got to be different. There's got to be something different in here because there's only so much I personally could have got out of digital. I know that lots of other photographers love digital because it, you know, it retains the quality and and you know, especially if you're doing like in-depth photography, like, you know, still life, like plants, like flowers or large landscape images, you need as much detail and quality as you can get. But for me, when I started shooting on film again, I thought I've really sort of reconnected myself into what I originally started shooting when I'm all the way back in A-level. It seems such a long time ago now. But for me, all the satisfaction came back. So you've only got 36 shots, you know, and obviously I'm doing nighttime stuff and sort of, you know, trying to really invest myself into that. And, you know, you've only got 36 shots. You can't see what you're taking pictures of. And that level of technicality is just so high. So when you do get your pictures back from the developers, you're like, I even nailed it on one and I've ruined the other 35. Or all of them are good, but they're slightly out of focus, or, you know, I was like, I need to go and reshoot that. And it's that sort of drive to go, actually, I can redo this, but it's going to cost me to do it. So it's just like, you know, trying to really sort of invest myself and develop my own personal knowledge and understanding. And that's half the reason I started the practice that I'm doing now, just so I could really sort of nail what it is in terms of knowledge that I have. Because after the BA, I was like, I just hated photography, just in general, actually, believe it or not. It sounds really bad. And that's not the fault of the uni or anything like that. It's just because I was hammering so many different subject matters on digital. And I was just like, well, I'm not really invested into one, so I might as well just hit the restart button and crack on from where I left off 5 years ago before I started uni, which is on film.
So you did you do a BA just before you started?
Yeah, somewhere in my head was like, yeah, do a master's straight after BA, full time as well. Just go for it. Yeah, because I just thought, you know, I felt like I had so much more to learn. I was like, you know, so I came out of BA and I was like, right, well, I just want to keep developing, really, to be honest. And at the time, it was James Cant who was going to be our master's lecturer, and I just thought, he's got a fountain of knowledge, this man, like. Just listen to him for ages, just going on about, you know, technical bits and research artists and just development in general. So I was like, you know what, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to be able to do it. Like, a lot of people said, you can do it a couple of years after you finish your BA. I was like, well, I'm going to be at work, I'm going to be, you know, and then, you know, starting a life and sort of put some stuff. If I don't do it now, I'm not going to be able to do it. So I thought,
so the right time.
Yeah, definitely. Because I was still in the sort of mindset of doing work. You know, I can't just, because once you get out of uni, you know, you start a job or you start developing into being another job, so like a teacher, for example, you know, then you will get into employment, it's full time, the hours would be 40 hours a week, and then you'd be like, if I go into a master's now, it's money, it comes out as the money.
And you have to really change your direction, really, don't you? If you are doing that full time, it does make sense, kind of migrating straight from a VA into MA, from what you were saying. I think it's sometimes it is the logical step, and I think a lot of, you know, I always remember the first thing we were said when we started BA by our head of the course. It was like, there's going to be thousands of people graduating with the same degrees. You know, so I thought, wow, that's actually really true. Like, you know, there's only 60 of us in this class, but there's going to be 60 other students over 20, 30 other unis. That's got a lot of people with the same degree. And I thought, you need to be able to do something to stand out against all these other people. And I thought, well,
an MA is probably the next thing. I think it's only like 30% of the UK have masters degrees or something like that. It's something like that kind of percentage.
So it really sounds like it was worked out for you in terms of, because you mentioned that you kind of hated photography in the UVA, and then to jump into an MA is quite a bold move. But from what you were saying before, it sounded a bit like your work really reflects your process has really reflected your desire to slow it down.
Definitely.
Get back to the photography and the skill. Do you think that's the kind of why maybe your work has come back?
Yeah, I think that is a fair assessment. What you just said is, I think it's literally just about me sort of getting back into photography, because as I said, I didn't like it at all. I didn't really see myself as a future as a photographer. And I still don't really now. I just do it because, I'm learning still. This is me developing. And going into the masters and, as you say, slowing down the practice, because you're working with a traditional method of photography that is quite slow, for the whole developing method, through taking pictures, through scanning it in and making a digital res file. There's a lot of time in that, whereas with digital, sort of plug and play, really, to be honest. You finish shooting, get your SD, CF card, whatever it may be, straight into the computer, and they're there. Whereas with film, you've got, you've only got 36 rolls. If you're shooting at night, again, that takes a much longer process. And then you have to finish the film, get it developed, which can take, depends if you get an hour of development done, where I get my stuff done. And then scan them all in, and that can take up to nearly 2 days. If you and then combined with uni as well, you could be looking. You got to really sort of bide your time well, because if you rush a film, it's gonna look bad. And trying to work everything, like trying to work uni around work life, uni life, and then trying to be able to go out and shoot. You've got to be able to have a decent time frame and sort of sort yourself out a little bit. But.
Definitely, I listened to you talk about that. It makes me feel a bit, I guess, maybe nervous. Like if I was to put myself in your situation, I'm going out, because we'll talk about it in a second, but you take a lot of nighttime photography, don't you? And I'm going out and I've got only 36 chances. I need to make sure this is right, but I can't tell because I don't have a screen to
no screen. There's no screen.
It sounds like there's an element of like risk and suspense.
Yeah, and I think it is risky, and it is, there's a lot of factors shooting at night. So not only is the film probably not going to be great or whatever, but you've also got a lot of human factor as well. You're walking around. I mean, the camera I shoot on came from Sue Ryder. It cost me £10, but the lens on the front of it's about £200. So it's like, some girlfriend said to me the other day, it's like, what happens if someone watches stuff? I was like, well, they can have the camera, but I want the film out of it first. I don't think I'd say that to them. But
very
she was like, oh, take the camera, but I need the film. But I think it just all sort of, there is an element of risk, and, that's why I like, because if it doesn't work, you can say, oh, right, well, it's either overexposed or it's got a light leak, it's out of focus. And I think the biggest challenge for me at the moment is obviously working in really dark situations. You can't see if the camera is necessarily focused properly, and that's probably one of the biggest killers of my images at the moment, is the focusing problem.
So just practically or logistically, let's say you go out and you take a photo, right, and you love the composition and it looks great, but the focus is not right. You would have to then necessarily go back a couple of days later to the same position to try and capture the same moment. That's got to be a lot of work.
It is.
And how would you know what tweaks to make?
So what I did was, what I do normally is with the focusing, like if there's a big light source within the image and it's towards the back end of or the foreground or the middle end of the image, I'll focus on the light source first, because cameras tend to work better in terms of autofocus. They work better when there's a big light source they can go off. But then as I've sort of refined my work, I've sort of seen that having massive light sources within the image don't work. It's not sort of cinematic enough. So having sort of no light within a situation, but having surrounding light up a subject matter I'm shooting, say it's like a garage door or something, but not having the light present, that's when I started to see focusing issues occur. I thought, well, what can I do to fix this problem? So I bought a big old torch, big old one from Fawn's, big old LED torch, and it works really well, because obviously there's it lights up the whole scene. So the camera, I can see what I need to focus on. The camera's actually quite good at autofocusing. As soon as there's light spread on the scene, I turn my torch off, take a light meter reading, so a reading of how long I need to expose my image for, and it just works perfectly. However, when you're shooting houses and stuff and you start shining torches into people's windows, you get, I haven't had the issue where someone comes out and goes, what on earth are you doing? I haven't had that problem yet, but walking around with a big old sort of mag light kind of thing, I'm just like, but it's a method I've needed to use in order to not waste the film I'm shooting on, and give me the peace of mind that actually this is a good method that works well for me. And and it takes one layer of risk off ruining an image, really, to be honest.
So let's talk a little bit about your the nighttime photography, because it's quite specific, and even though you mentioned earlier about there needs a lot of detail in terms of landscape and flowers and all of that, right? There's still subject in your photography, right? And I guess what I'm getting at is like why nighttime, and what is it that you're looking to try and capture?
So with my work, I sort of a lot of my inspiration, which we'll probably come on to a bit later on, a lot of my inspiration comes from films, stuff like David Finch, like Fight Club, Drive by Nicholas Winding Refn. I thought these films are amazing because the majority of the scenes are shot at night, and I thought, like, this is fantastic. And then going from there, obviously then shooting back onto film, it captures that sort of that filmy grain sort of thing, like films and TV, and it looks really cinematic. And the fact there's no people within my images sort of harps back in the BA days where I used to photograph people all the time. And I always say this, it's like flogging a dead horse. This was, why do you shoot at night with no people? And it's like, honestly, I really don't like people anymore in my work. I just can't stand them. And it's not, it's not a reflection. I like being around people, I like talking to people. But when it comes to photography, there's so much organisation and stuff around people being, it's like, they might blink or all sorts of stuff like that. And it takes all that layer of logistics out. So shooting the subject matter I am, so like around the city, sort of like, dimly lit alleyways, garage doors, sort of like, backwaters, stuff like that, over sort of, just capturing sort of the idea that humanity was there at one point. And sort of like, the idea of the lack of humanity within images sometimes makes people feel uncomfortable, because a lot of photography, a lot of the time, the viewer feels settled at the fact they can see a person within an image because it's something they can relate to. So and as soon as you take the layer of humanity out, people are like, they don't really know what the picture is telling them, and B, they feel uneasy because there's nothing to sort of like lock onto and engage within the image. And that's kind of where my work sits, and the sort of like, there is a subject matter there, but the viewer has to decide the narrative themselves. There is a layer there, like, there's no people within the image. It's obviously a nighttime scene.
And you're going for a cinematic look.
Cinematic look, sort of like a film still. And it's then up to the viewer to decide, wow, this is what I want to believe with the images. And I get quite a lot of stick. It's like, well, why don't your images have sort of meaning for the viewer? And I think, well, a lot of the time, like, pictures show exactly what they show, and there's not a lot of depth to them. So for me, the viewer, sort of, you're giving them creative control. I've merely taken the picture, I've captured that moment in time, and it's for them really to decide, oh, this is what it means to me, sort of thing. And within photography, I think there's sort of like a bit of a disconnect between the photographer actually really showing what they want to show and forcing the viewer to see, oh, this is what I want you to see, and then a photographer taking a picture and letting the viewer make up their mind what they want to believe it is. And and it's a lot the same with TV, movies and film. There's so much narrative there. It makes them mind. But there's some TVs, films and games where, like, the viewer has to put their own mind to it. It's like, oh, really, that's what that means, or have to do a bit of thinking.
So if somebody's listening to this and they kind of want to be able to sort of get their eyes on your work, we got the MA degree show coming up. If you're listening to this before August 2019, what can we expect from yourself? You don't feel like you have to give away any surprises if you want to keep it, but
it's not particularly any surprises. I want to go quite large, so I've been doing some tests with, obviously, because I scan all my negatives in, so I've got to be very careful how large I print them digitally, because you can only print so far when they've been scanned in. But I'm looking at doing 9 sort of A2 style boards in a sort of like a grid format. The idea behind that is there's a lot of other photographers who shoot at night, like Todd Hydo being one of them, who does a lot of sort of like diptych kind of style, so we have lots of different sizes of image, all of the same sort of subject matter of night, and that sort of works really well to draw people in. But sort of like that cluttered style is not really my sort of thing, so having a sort of grid of 3 by 3 really works to sort of like really engage with it, because all the images will flow into each other. In terms of, I think it's just having a straightforward design like that is something I'm sort of looking forward to do, but I need to be able to make sure that I need to do a couple more test sort of prints on the images I actually want to use to make sure that A2 is not going to look horrendous, because once negatives from 35 have been scanned in, they do lose an element of quality, especially when they're starting to be blown up quite large. But failing that, if A2 doesn't work, then I'll probably go size back down to A3, which would be a shame, because I quite like the idea of my work being quite large. But I think that's one of the downsides of shooting a traditional method of photography and then scanning it in digitally. If I had access to a darkroom and it wasn't going to cost me a fortune, I'd do it properly. But unfortunately, just for the sake of time, money, and sort of accessibility, we don't really have that option. So
it's interesting, because listening to you talk, like, there is an incredible amount of skill that has to go into this. And I think when we started talking, you mentioned about like the MA work is almost like a reaction to all your work that you've done with BA, and it's about you as a photographer slowing down and relearning and getting right back down to the essence of it. And I can't help but think about like the world that, or my experience with photography, it's all snap and go.
Yeah.
Right. It's all phones and snapping and go, and the fact that you're kind of taking this, you're in reverse to everybody else. Yeah. It's really quite exciting listening to you, but also quite daunting from somebody who's very unskilled in photography. Listening to kind of the amount of process that you have to go through.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and I think there's nothing wrong with going back in time a little bit. I think it really does reteach you skills that you sometimes just don't learn with digital. You've got to be very, very patient with film, because not only, as we said already, you can't see what you're taking pictures of, and I think that's what I quite like. That sort of feeling of satisfaction that you get. It's like the same if you got loads of likes on Instagram or something. Oh, it feels good. It's exactly that feeling once you get a film back from the development. It's like, it's warm. It's like having a bath. It's so nice.
It must be a real validation of your skill, isn't it?
Yeah, and
you get it back and it's the perfect.
Yeah, and there's so many times I've never been a big fan of my own work, sort of thing. I think I am my biggest critic, and but when you get the one picture back and you go, yeah, I think I did good here. But I just seem to have lost that with digital, because I think it's because you can see it straight away and you go, that doesn't work, and you tweak it so much and you just it's going to be fine, sort of thing. And that's what film has done for me. And it's gonna, once film sort of wears out for me, I don't really know what else I'm going to turn to be honest. But I think film at the moment for me is like, this is me as
it's
a creator.
Good. It sounds like you're very much like true to the way you feel. Reacting to your previous experience to do the next thing, and then maybe when you get bored of being out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning taking pictures, you move on to the next thing. But I'm really looking forward to seeing some of your work.
Thank you very much.
I've been lucky to see a little bit of it before, but looking forward to seeing some of the finished pieces. So let's talk a little bit about what you might plan on doing next. I know it's a daunting question. I've asked everybody, so it's got to be fair to everybody else.
I think, as in work-wise, or just sort of like just after the masters.
After the masters, like what your plan is next. Where you see yourself going.
I think the next ring. I've got a couple of irons in the fire in terms of what I want to do, sort of job-wise and career-wise. But at the moment, it's sort of obviously because I've been in education now probably non-stop. I took a gap between the A-levels and starting uni, but I've been in university now just coming up nearly 4.5 years, and I thought, it's a long time. I need a bit of a gap now.
Yeah.
So the idea, the goal is to teach. That's for me.
Very honourable.
But in terms of like art or photography or something along the line, sort of like inspire the next generation. I know that sounds a bit weird, but in terms of, I like the idea that there's probably young kids out there who want to take up art or photography, and it's trying to you can sort of do this sort of thing, and like if teaching them how to do it. But that's a process I need to sort of look into. But in terms of getting into teaching, it's another year and a half of in and out of classrooms in terms of learning how to become a teacher, and you just won't have enough drive if you just come out of a masters. You just want a bit of a break.
Yeah.
So the plan is for me, obviously. So when finishing the masters, obviously still practice using film. I want to just keep developing that and making a really big body of work, and sort of put myself out on social media and all those sorts of bits and pieces like that. But the idea really is to sort of set myself up in a studio. So I'm going to be working as much as I can. I work for a company called Wex at the moment, which sells digital cameras and film cameras, the whole lot.
So you're in the right environment.
The right environment. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I can go full time and sort of earn some money in, sort myself out, get my own scanner, because at the moment obviously I'm using Uni's and I'm not going to be available to use Uni scanners. So, you know, and it's going to be in a bit of an investment, obviously, to be honest. And I know for a fact that, you know, my work's not going to go miles and miles, and people, you know, but for me, it's just my own personal gain. I don't care.
Is there any like the next skill that you might want to learn when it comes to photography? Because we talked a lot about this, like nighttime photography and how skills heavy it is with film. Do you have any kind of like dreams that next thing you would go and just try something like this?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've been quite lucky in the fact that I've swung from sort of genre to genre within photography. So, like, I've done a lot of music stuff. So, worked with people like Chase and Status and sort of other people like that. Cool. And that was cool. And it got to a point where, you know, you're coming in and out of like nightclubs, you're going to music events, and you're just absolutely shattered. And you know, promoters they want you there, but they want the images at the end of the day and all that sort of thing. So, done that, did a bit of documentary photography, and that was fun because, you know, you really get to ingrain yourself with people. You know, and find out how they live their lives and the stuff they do, and following them about, and, you know, just documenting their sort of pastimes, hobbies and bits and pieces like that. But for me, I think the next one, because sort of the next skill I want to adapt is I do want to bring people back into photography, because at the end of the day, people like seeing other people, be it fashion or anything like that. And I've done fashion stuff on film for a fashion student called Jasmine. She's just graduated, and we did a whole sort of bit together where you know, she replaced a mobile phone with a fish, so like a bag of a fish, because the idea was we look at our phone every 10 seconds. We don't realise it, but we're always looking at it, you know, and it's like a memory, like a goldfish, sort of repetitive. It was quite clever. And that was really fun. You know, we smashed through about 5 rolls of film in about 3 hours, and it looked amazing, you know, and it looked really good, and she was really happy with them. And she said, you know, she did a number of different shoots with a number of different photographers, and she said she was by far impressed the most with mine. And I was like, well, thank you very much. I don't shoot compliment. People. That's great. And I was like, yeah, I'll take that. It's really cool. But yeah, I think I really want to start pulling people back into it, more of a fashion element. But that's something, you know, that's something that I'm going to have to start looking at doing progressively, because obviously if you jump straight back into something that you're not familiar with, especially fashion, I never normally do fashion photography. If somebody asks, oh, can you shoot this? I was like, you do know I'm not a fashion photographer. Really, I don't work with people in general. Oh no, but I like the idea of it shot on film. Right. Okay, then I'll help you out, right? As long as you give me a firm idea of what you want it to look like, because a lot of the time people will come to me and go, can you shoot this on film? It's like, yeah, but what's the idea? Can you work that out? It's not my shoot. This is your shoot.
So is this how you would necessarily kind of approach briefs or projects, like if you're working with clients? We know that. Yeah,
I think a lot of the time, if I'm working with either, if it's myself, it's a different story. But if I was working for somebody else, you know, I need to know what you want out of this, especially if it's on film. Yeah. You know, because you can come to me with an idea and go, oh, I want to do this. Right, okay, cool. So then I'll shoot it the way they've briefly told me, and they'll come back and go, oh, we could have done this differently. And because it's film, it's an expensive mistake to make. You know, a lot of the time, if I've worked with somebody that's shot on film, they've paid for the film. You know, and the film that they tend to like the most is obviously the most expensive film. You know, and that's generally how it goes, like 50 quid for 5 rolls, sort of thing. And, you know, and then you know, you shoot all the film, and they're happy at the time, and obviously because they can't see the images, they believe the whole thing's good, and they trust you to have made the right decisions in terms of settings of the cameras and all that bits and pieces like that. So when it's all developed and gone, oh, could we redo this? I was like, well, yeah, but we've got to buy more film now. You know, we've got to get the model. But if it was digital, it'd be completely different. And obviously, if it's digital, you know, you shoot it on the day, wire it up to a computer on location or something, we can see exactly what's going wrong. The models shutter eyes on some of these, so we need to get. But with film, you've got to be right. What do you want? How do you want it to look? You need to understand exactly what the weather's going to be, because weather affects film massively. Yeah. You know, because it's some films have got different tones to them. So sort of like the film I shoot on the most is called Kodak Portrait. There's 3 different types. There's one, like, it's all done by sensitivity to light, so it's ISO. So you've got 160, 400, which I shoot on virtually everything, and then 800. And obviously it's sort of a more warm tone, but it's like a really fine grained film, so it's like you don't really notice it's on film sometimes unless you really make it obvious.
Yeah.
And you know, and there is a reason why it's probably one of the most expensive films. It's because it's so good. And you know, and that's why a lot of people go for it in terms of fashion stuff, because it's, you know, it keeps skin detail in, and it keeps quality of the clothes and stuff, and it doesn't especially with fashion, the last thing you want to be doing is changing a designer's designs, because they get really annoying when you start doing that.
There's just, listening to you talk, there's considerable amount to think about, like skill wise and all of logistics and stuff, which is really like, fascinating. If somebody listened to this that was thinking about potentially doing photography, what sort of advice would you give them, after listening to all the things we've talked about, like, or your experience on the MA?
I think it's one of those things. I think they're still doing it now today. If you wanted to start doing photography, you can start at a GCSE in a lot of schools, and a lot of the time they will throw you straight into film. That's what happened to me. They threw you, here you go. We've got a number of film cameras at school. Here you go, here's some film, go and shoot it, and we can develop it here. Like, it's normally black and white because it's the cheapest out of the two to develop.
Yeah.
If somebody came to me and go, I want to start photography, it's like, well, what do you want to really photograph? It's the same thing when I'm at work. I want to buy a camera. Right? What do you want to photograph? I just want to photograph my family and all that stuff. Here you go, here's a point and shoot. You don't need anything else. I want to come and photograph birds. Okay, well, here's a good camera. Here's a massive lens you're going to need for it. And a lot of the time it is sort of like category specific. So a lot of the time it's, if somebody wants, I want to do sports and stuff like that, and it's it's understanding what you want to photograph first.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, a lot of people go, I just want to buy a camera because I want to do everything. And that's great, because if you're not hammering yourself down to one specific genre before you start, like a lot of people, I want to shoot, let's say we want to shoot sports, for example. They'll get all the kit, they'll get everything they need, and they realise they hate sport. Like, they don't like doing it. So if it was me, if someone went, I want to start photography, it's like, well, don't hammer yourself down to one genre first. Get yourself what you need to get, and if you actually decide, I really like this, and then you've worked on everything else, you've sort of decided, like, portraiture is the best for me. I like interacting with people. I like telling people how to look, or telling them how to pose and stuff, and that's fantastic. And I think when it comes down to photography, it's sort of a lot of the case. And like, I'm a photographer. It's like, what do you shoot on? I shoot on an iPhone X. It's like, you're not, are you? Like, but I think that's probably one of the biggest killers of photography, as you said so yourself. Like, iPhones have become more sort of quality driven now than most cameras at the moment. But that's just generally what happens sometimes. Yeah,
well, that's really good advice. I think just before we kind of wrap up here. Obviously, all of your work is visual, right? As a photographer, and listening to us talk about your work on a podcast I've had such fun listening to your passion behind it. If somebody listening to this wants to find out more and see what we're talking about, where's the best place for them to go?
Best place is Instagram at the moment, because I'm currently rebuilding my website and I've got to pay the bill. So I'm going to get that set up for the degree show, and then obviously start, putting stuff up there. But at the moment it's Instagram, so it's like at strictly35 underscore between the strictly and the 35 bit. And on there is just everything at the moment. Like, if I've shot anything on film, it's on there.
Cool.
And it's usually sort of seasonal. So at the moment it's loads of nighttime stuff, but I can guarantee you there's going to be daytime stuff on there at some point, because I'm getting really, as I said to you before we started this podcast, I'm getting a bit sick of being out at 3 a.m. on street corners and stuff. We've got like people coming up, what are you doing? Sort of thing, like drunk people, and it's just like, oh god,
all that harassment.
I just want to go to bed.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, we'll put that information in the description of the podcast, so people can find it and just click on that there. And if the website is up and running by then, we'll obviously put that in as well. But thank you so much for coming.
That's right. Thank you for having me. It's
chat with us.
Really, really cool. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're very passionate about what you do, and it's,
thank you.
It's kind of blown my mind a little bit. So hopefully that's inspired some people out there. But you'll be able to see Elliot's work at the degree show at the end of August for the MA degree show here at Norwich University Arts. But just thanks again for coming.
No worries. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Thanks for listening. Bye bye.